This is Ray Houghton, and you are listening to the Fulham Focus podcast.
Fulham.
Oh, hello and welcome to the Fulham Focus podcast. My name is Jmac, your host. What a ball of fire that game was. End-to-end rock and roll stuff. Hardly. More of a battle against 11 men behind the ball with an uninspired attack from us until our Trojan Josh Onomah horse finally managed to get us the win. We are fourth. With me to talk about this electric game are Senior Matthew Statto and Matthew Reese Baldwin. Buckle up and away we go.
Fulham.
All right, lads, we were about 1 minute away, maybe just less, from calling this a terrible game and a terrible result. But how much can we let Josh's goal paper over the cracks? It was an absolute dishwater game, wasn't it? What are your opening thoughts, Mr. Statto?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, the game itself, it wasn't a good game at all. I know we scored in the 96th minute, I think it was, which is great. Everyone loves a 96th minute goal. But when it's a terrible game like that, and when we play terribly, it's good, but it's not great.
I mean, you say we were 1 minute away from it being a terrible game. It could still be a terrible game, even if we managed to win it.
That's true.
So yeah, it was absolutely one of the worst games that I have when it comes to Fulham. I was thinking back to this is going to throw some people off. The Charlton game in the 2004-05 season, the 0-0, was the worst game that I'd ever seen. However, this game probably, again, was 30 seconds away from taking that title.
You can tell the game was bad because I think everyone was sort of looking at each other with anticipation that we were about to break a record, that it was the first 0-0 at the Cottage since 2011 against Aston Villa.
Fortunately, that didn't happen, which is a good thing. Like we've all said already, that doesn't excuse the poor performance, especially against a Birmingham team that have come off the back of 2-3-0 losses, or they've conceded 3 goals in the last 2 games since the restart.
And haven't won a game in 9 matches, is that right?
Yeah, they're a team who are clearly on the slide, going down. I think they're just about safe from relegation now, but they're not a great outfit.
I mean, we could talk about the lineup, I suppose. Unchanged, 4-2-3-1. There was a bit of false hope with Stanfield potentially being on the bench because he had an Instagram post and then it went down again. I don't know if he was in trouble for that. Right to keep the same formula, would you say, Mr. Reese?
I was going to say, if you want to keep this podcast exciting, we should just skip to the Onomah goal. We could just ignore everything that's happened, talk about the Onomah goal, and then move straight on to the Nottingham Forest preview. But I'm pretty sure that won't be very entertaining for the listeners, I'm sure. I can understand keeping an unchanged starting 11. I think it's really the bench that has been sort of causing a lot of confusion, a lot of angst and pessimism amongst the fans, because there's no real attacking option there. We've been crying out for someone like Kamara, for instance. We still don't know what's going on with him. Substitutes bench still needs a lot of work, in my view.
For the stat heads out there, I can let you know that the back four that we played, that's the 4th time they've played together. And remarkably, they've had 3 wins out of the 4 times they've played together. For the midfield, they've played 5 times together. That's the Kearney-Reid-Arter combination, and that's yielded 2 wins. And I think what's quite interesting, in the absence of Mitrovic, going for the Bobby Cav knockout option, they've played those front 3 for 3 times, and that's actually managed to get 3 wins, a 100% record. So take from that what you will.
God, someone put a fire extinguisher on him. That is electrical static. Then, well,
so what you're saying, Mr. Arter, is that Alexander Mitrovic has been holding us back all this time. We should have sold him with Bobby Reid up front. We'd have won every single game.
Let's play more long balls to Bobby Reid. That was great. Let's just keep doing that for the game. Bloody hell. All right, so let's talk about the match highlights. Okay, let's start with... Well, I mean, it could have been 2-0 at the start. In the second minute, Hector loses the ball, and it's a terrible pass to Rodak, and nearly gets Birmingham a goal. And then in the 3 minutes, a knockout. He did this a couple of times the game. He decided that he wanted to be a second fullback on the right, and it made a terrible pass. Ended up going straight to Jude Bellingham. Could have been 2-0 at the start of this game, and there was a few errors from Hector.
My only theory behind this was that they practiced all week thinking that a less mobile forward in Lukas Jukovic was going to be the man up top for them. So they were saying, we can pass along the back. It's fine. No one's going to be chasing us down because Jukovic doesn't possess all that amount of pace. And then when it's Scott Hogan, who's actually going to, run at you and press you a little bit more, it's sort of pushing them off again. That's my only rationale for thinking, because Michael Hector has not been the same since this whole restart.
Well, Hector also had a terrible error in the 13th minute. He was beaten too easily for a cross and it ended up in a very hairy moment in our own box. Statto, your thoughts on Hector?
In defence of Hector, he's a very good defender, and it was very good when he came in, because at the time we thought our defence was a bit all over the place. We were playing Mawson and Ream, who wasn't the worst pairing in the world. We were getting wins, but there's still that kind of lack of authority in our defence. And then Hector came in and we thought that was solved and everything was great and wonderful. And obviously the restarts had an effect on that. But, I think almost it's kind of like the honeymoon period for Hector's over now. And he's not going to have a good game every single game. And we need to be accepting of that. But he's still a very good defender. He still had a good game. He still kept a clean sheet. But it is getting a bit more noticeable that a few more mistakes from him are creeping in, and kind of need him to iron those out, to be honest.
Yeah, and I thought Ream had a good game. Compared to the other few games, I thought Ream was stronger this match. From the defence to the attack, lacking so much fluidity, not just the first half, but the second. And we did get better, arguably. But there were just so many 1-2s that just kept on failing. Like I said, long balls to Bobby Reid up front. Knockout had his back to their goal most of the time, made no runs. Cav had lots of bad touches, and I think the only cross he made was in the 5th minute. Just the front three is non-existent to me at the moment. Obviously, Mitro's not there, but just no shots on target in the first half, and I want to know why.
This brings you back to sort of the point that Matt Arthur was making. This is the third time that we've played this front three. Am I correct? Did I mishear that?
You are correct. The second time was the last game.
There we go. So this is only the third time they've played together, the second time on Tuesday against QPR. Is it just a case that they're still trying to get used to each other? Is that again? That's my only theory behind it. Is they've been so used to having Mitrovic to play off, but now this front three is still quite new. That's my way of thinking.
Or is it that Birmingham, 11 men behind the ball most of the time, look for counter-attack, long throw-ins? I mean, that tells you everything you need to know.
It's interesting what Baldo said there, that the front three haven't clicked, they haven't played together that often, but in fact, they have kind of played together. So if Bobby's not in attack, he's in midfield. Obviously, there's not Mitro there as the focal point. There's no one they can kind of turn to going forward. But then I need to question the coaching and Parker's tactics. If you're aware that Mitrovic isn't going to be available, then why do you play the same tactics of lumping the ball forward? Surely you play a different system. You look for the shorter passes. You look at playing it to feet to Bobby Reid. You look down the flanks potentially. You just look to do something different rather than just play the same system we play with Mitrovic, but with Bobby Reid, who's like half the body mass of Mitrovic. It didn't make sense. And we can be harsh on the front three, but it's not their fault that they're getting told to play in a way that doesn't really suit them.
Okay, so that was the end of the first half. I mean, really uninspiring, no shots on target, awful stuff. And then the second half, we bring Joe Bryan on, and we did look a bit better. I mean, not hugely, but we slowly breathed into it a lot easier with Joe Bryan on the pitch. And what were your thoughts, on Joe Bryan coming on?
I think it was a sensible move from Parker. I know throughout the season he's been a bit reluctant to play both Christie and Bryan because they're both kind of attacking-minded fullbacks. So if both go forward, we can be exposed down the wings quite easily, which is why we always have Odoi playing either left back or right back. And, it was good from Parker to sense that Birmingham are just sitting back and defending, so we can take that risk and bring on two attacking fullbacks. I thought when Bryan came on, he put in a few good crosses. There was some good service there. It doesn't excuse the fact the game was still quite slow and quite drab, and we weren't kind of getting those passes together like we usually would. It was a positive change, but it still didn't change things massively.
You were mentioning about Birmingham there, obviously very defensive this match. Reece, do you think Tom Kearney had a better game this game? He looked a little bit more free than most times he's played recently, would you say?
Yeah, he had his moments. There's a chance later on where he did incredibly well down, it was our left-hand side, and then just completely he did everything right, and then just for some reason scooped the ball
He gave it to Cyrus Christie. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He nutmegged the defender in the 82nd minute and then gave it to Christie. And Christie, he should have taken a shot. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was an improvement. It's not quite to the levels of Tom Kearney that we've come to love and expect. With the shots from 25, 30 yards. Something I'm wondering why that's more or less gone from his game.
Because everyone else is fucking doing it. I mean, Knockaert is just, he just keeps on taking shots from so far out. It feels like we only take shots from outside the box these days.
Kearney, since the restart, has just looked invisible on the pitch. He's normally quite an influential player. He plays his key passes, but I saw none of that. The only glimpse we got was, as you mentioned, when he took on those players, he nutmegged them, got into the box, and then with a really poor end product. I don't know what's wrong with that. I don't know if he's low on confidence. It's just something just doesn't seem right there, and I can't quite put my finger on it yet.
Maybe it's a midfield synergy problem. I mean, in the 61st minute, you have Josh Onomah come on for Harry Arter, which obviously long-term was the right decision. What does Harry Arter do apart from fall over, shout, and foul people?
To his credit, he does kind of put himself about. He pushed the tackles in. And oddly enough, going back to Kearney quickly, he's kind of playing in a more advanced role than Kearney is at times, which doesn't really make sense. It's kind of like the Steph Joe that we had a few seasons ago, but like kind of an uncut, rough version of him that is just more unpredictable.
He seems all over the pitch at some point. All right, so Josh comes on for Harry Arter. Still nothing. 69th minute, more attempts to break the wall down. Cabano comes on for Cavallero. Still nothing, although I've got to say, I thought Cabano looked a lot better than Cavallero as soon as he came on. 74th minute, more crap shots from Knockaert after a terrific Brian cross. He hits the side netting. Still just can't get anything on target. And then the 82nd minute, we had the Kearney nutmeg thing, which you've spoken about. 86th minute, I think this was the red miss moment for all of us this game. The double save made by their goalkeeper.
Up until this point was the highlight of the match, which I think tells you everything you need to know.
And if we hadn't have won the game, it's what we would have looked back on and been even angry about, isn't it?
Exactly. But it goes back to what I was saying. What happened? It was Joe Bryan taking a shot for about 25, 30 yards. You never know what's going to happen. And as it happened, Lee Camp, who I thought throughout the game was looking incredibly flaky. He was dropping a few passes. Again, you just never know what's going to happen. So you do that, and then Bobby Reid's there to follow up. He should have done better. I mean, I want to give some credit to Lee Camp. It was a very good save. But at that same stage, you should expect someone of Bobby Reid it's not as if it's Alfie Mawson following the ball in, for instance. You can give a defender a little bit of leeway there because it's not his job. But someone like Bobby Reid, you would expect him to finish that thing off. He's a nearly man. In any other thing, you would expect him to score that goal, but for him, for some reason, he just can't do it.
We've established this season that he's not an out-and-out striker, and he's kind of been forced to having to play as this lone striker role in the absence of Mitrovic and in the absence of Kamara, wherever Kamara may be. It was a fantastic save, and if you see where the ball dropped to Reid, there was a very small gap between Camp and him, so all Lee Camp had to do was make himself look big, and chances are he would have got something on it. He's the nearly man because for another player like Mitrovic, it could have been a case where the keeper gets a touch, but it still kind of ricochets in somehow. And for Bobby Reid, it just doesn't. And he's unlucky and he's low on confidence. And I guess just when it goes against you, it does go against you. And we can only hope that his luck and fortunes turn around sooner rather than later for us.
Well, we always said that Bobby Reid just needs a goal. It turns out that he might need about 3 or 4 for him to actually start rolling this machine with Fulham. But I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. Okay, so in the 86th minute, you've got Jasper who comes on for Knockaert. I've mentioned Knockaert briefly. A terrible game for him? I mean, apparently this new permanent contract, which we haven't spoken about on Fulham Focus yet, the new permanent contract for Knockaert does not look too fun for us, really, with these performances that Knockaert keeps dishing out. What would you say to that, Mr. Rees?
Yeah, the fact that it hasn't been signed yet, has it? It's one of these that we're going to
there's
sign
still
it.
Time.
There's still time to back out of it.
Yeah.
Knockaert has been like today. I didn't think he was all that bad. Of the two wingers, Cavallero and Knockaert, for large parts of this season, I think it's undisputable that Cavallero has been the better winger of the two. But today, I didn't think he had all that bad a game, all things considered. He was one of the few people that actually managed to get a shot on target. So if he gets, I think it was our first shot on target he managed to get. So it's just a case of getting the inconsistencies out of his game, and then we'll work out whether the 10 million fee is going to be anywhere near worth it. If we had the choice of backing out of the deal at this stage, I probably would say yes, in my view. Save the £10 million and put it elsewhere. Maybe from someone dropping out of the Premier League. I don't know.
But he just plays like a sort of creative midfielder that happens to be on the wing. I know he's meant to cut in, but I sometimes want to scream him. Just run towards the byline, mate. Put a cross in.
The way you mentioned how he's just on his left foot and he cuts in, he's basically a bit like a B-Tech Iron Robin, really, but with no end product, which is a shame. Like Baldwin said, I don't think he had a bad game, and I don't think he's actually had a particularly bad game since the restart. It's just that he gets a lot of the ball and he wastes it a lot of the time. But, he's still energetic, he's still passionate, he still tries to win the ball back, he tries to do something with it. And it just feels like the rest of the team just aren't on the same wavelength as him. Not that he's on a better wavelength, they're just not syncing up to him. In regards to the contract, the fact is that our bitter rivals Brentford have managed to sign their attacking trio of Benrahma, Mbeumo and Ollie Watkins, all three of them for the same price. And they are much better value for money than what we're getting for Knockout and what we'll get for Knockout when we sign him on a permanent. And it does make you question, is it worth it?
Brentford, who have just smashed Wigan 3-0 today. Poor old Wigan. Oh dear, it's going to happen, isn't it? I honestly do think Brentford are going to go unbeaten. They've got such juice in them now. 89th minute. I think Birmingham are actually holding on for dear life now. The chances are slowly coming. We're completely in their own half, the majority for the rest of this game. Tom Kenny gets a free kick. It hits the wall, goes out for a corner, and we do nothing with that either. And then in the 94th minute, finally, we get it. Josh Onomah gets a nice pass from Harrison Reed. Reece, talk to me about this goal.
Yeah, it was one of the more aesthetically pleasing goals I think we've scored this season. The way we played it down that right-hand side, nice intricate passing, and then it was two one-touch passes, I think, to finish the move off. It was very, very, very good, it must be said. I don't know whether this is a case of, Birmingham City were very tired legs after us huffing and puffing for so long, trying to blow their doors down. One of the better goals we've scored this season, and couldn't have come at a better time.
We've talked about Bobby Reid a lot in this podcast and kind of his downfall and what he's lacking, but what we need to say is that he is fantastic at kind of creating chances, and this was the case here. You see him down the right, his little turn, his little shimmy to get the pass into Harrison Reed. That was fantastic play, and that's what he's good at, and that's what we'd like to see more of from him. And then Onomah, where his positioning is, he's kind of in the position you'd expect Tom Kearney to be in, or the Kearney of a few seasons ago to be in, just in that kind of advanced position near the edge of the box, hanging by, waiting for that ball to come out to him. Great position by Onomah. It was just a nice little finish, really. Really
nice finish. And it was just nice to see him get a goal after not being started these recent games. I mean, that's surely got to be him starting now. Would you start him for the next game, Statto?
100%. I think there's been a lot of, like we've mentioned how Kearney has been very invisible lately. I would consider starting him in that Kearney position, in that advanced role, because I know Parker likes to play in there. Play him there, give Kearney a rest. And honestly, I don't know what's the worst that could happen.
Well, what are your thoughts, Reece? What is the worst that can happen? Over to you.
What is the worst? I think I was thinking this to myself literally just after the final whistle. It's a case of trial by error in this sense. If you score a goal, then you must be in the team straight away. It happened for Cyrus Christie. He managed to score the goal in midweek. He gets to start the next game. Josh Onomah scores a goal this game. He's going to start in midweek against Forest. So
and Harry Arter scores against QPR, and there's no way he's being dropped.
Exactly. It's faultless logic. It's like Garth Brooks. It's like Garth Brooks's Team of the Week for BBC. If you score a goal, you're automatically in. Is the way his logic seems to work. It's the same logic here with Scott Parker. So I would definitely expect Josh Onomah to start against Forest in midweek.
Well, let's talk more about the logic of Scott Parker. Let's go on to Scott Parker's rating from you, Mr. Statto. What number would you give him for this?
Oh, it's a tough one this week.
It is weird, isn't it? It's a really tough one because
it's weird because I was ready to come on this pod and just slag him off, probably saying he's getting things wrong, it's not going great, and that was the case. But yet we've won. We've got the win, and it's tough. And he bought Onomah on, which was a good move. I guess I know a 5 out of 10 sounds about right, because amongst all this kind of anger at Parker and the frustration of how boring we're playing, we still need to bear in mind that we are without our main man in Mitrovic, and we are still chipping away and getting wins. And that's kind of the important thing, isn't it?
I think fives probably is just about right. I look at players like Cavallero and I just feel like there's no way you're this bad. There's no way you're this bad. Knockout is like, there's no way you should be this ineffective. I think Scott Parker is probably a very likable guy and probably a good coach somewhere or other, but I just don't think he is actually particularly inspiring for these players to actually want. Just maybe he's just not got the attacking mind for it. I'm not too sure. Reece, what would you give Scott Parker?
I'm not going to fall into the trap of giving him a higher score just because of the fact that we won. Very much like Usual Suspects. It's a bit of a meh film, but a great ending. Don't make that change the fact it's a meh film just because the ending's very good. So I'm going to say a 4. Don't let the late goal fool you. It was a very dire performance, and I don't think he gets any praise for bringing Onomah on because it wasn't like this great thing that we were all demanding him to do. It was just a run-of-the-motion substitution. So he gets no credit for that either. So it's a 4.
A 4. So paper over the cracks for you then. Well, speaking of crack, we'll find out what the crack is for Nottingham Forest, which is a huge game on Tuesday night, straight after this.
Fulham.
Don't smoke crack. And welcome back. So Nottingham Forest, Tuesday night, huge game. We have an opportunity here to finally beat 2 teams in the top 6. We got a lot of stats here, but that's why we have Mr. Statto Arter. So over to you, Statto. Give us your Nottingham Forest breakdown.
So what I've done here, I've wanted to look at how Forest were getting on before the restart. Mm-hmm. Because, back in March, it was a very different landscape to where we are now. It's actually a bit of a shame we're not playing them when we normally should have played them, because at the time, since 2020, they had only won 5 out of the 13 games they had played in the league. And they're actually riddled and plagued with injuries. They had players like Lewis Grabban, Joe Lolly and Sam Bassell, 3 of their key players. They were nursing minor injuries. They were playing, but they were not fully fit at all. I read an article, I remember at the time back in March, that only 10 senior players were reported to be training at one point in March for them. And they were literally just wrapping them up in cotton wool, keeping them in the fridge until match days. They were struggling and they could have very easily fallen out of the playoffs. And I think had we played them then, it could have been a good result for us. However, there was a pause and we have restarted and months have passed, which means that there's been time for all these players to recover from injuries. And I think Forest are one of the big winners of this restart because they've had that time to recover and almost have a mini pre-season.
They're one of the teams that we feared would benefit, basically.
And the results kind of show that. They, in the 4 games that they've played, they haven't lost any. They've won 2 and drawn 2, almost won 3, but not for Chris Martin in the 91st minute earlier on.
Chrissy.
They've managed to score 6 in that time and concede 3 in those 4 games. Interestingly enough, the 3 goals that they've conceded have all come in stoppage time since the restart. So if we're looking to score a goal, it's going to be a repeat of what happened against Birmingham today. And also a bit of a little omen here, but the last 3 opponents they played, there have been a red card for these opponents against Forest. It looks like they're very much on course to finish in the playoffs by the look of things. Whoever wins out of us and Forest, they'll still kind of have that sniff or outside chance of getting the automatics, whereas the loser will kind of be resigned to thinking it's the playoffs now. I think as Fulham fans, we all think we're going to be in the playoffs now. I don't think there's many Fulham fans that think we can get automatics. If we lose this game, then I think they'll just put that nail in the coffin that, it's playoffs at best for us this year. And
how many times have we said that, though? Oh, well, that's all the automatics gone. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, that's the automatic. Yeah, we've done this so many times.
We said Leeds was the last chance saloon, but this is kind of past the last chance saloon. This is the very last chance saloon.
So, last chance saloon then, Reece. What players would you be looking out for in this game?
Players I really want to look out for and sort of focus on are Ben Watson and Sam Bassell, who are their 2 holding midfielders, as it's like to be in a 4-2-3-1 formation for them. And I think touching on what we were saying with Josh Onomah earlier and thinking that he's likely or should really start the game, I think if we can get that pace in midfield, because Sam Bassell is 31 and Ben Watson is either 34 or 35, Nottingham Forest are going to be lacking pace in front of their back 4. So I think if we can exploit it and run at them with the likes of Onomah and Harrison Reed, I think there's a chance for us to overwhelm them. So Sam Bassell and Ben Watson are solid defensive players. They lead the team. They lead the team in tackles. I think I was reading the stat the other day. If we can just deal with them with a little bit of pace, I think there's a chance for us to do well.
Statto, what players do you should be keeping our eye on?
I'm going to pick the obvious one here, and that is, of course, their talisman, Lewis Grabban. He's 32 now, but he's been in the Championship for God knows how many years, and he just performs for whatever club he's at. He just scores goals. It's what he does. He's shown this because he's actually got 19 goals this year. That's put him third behind Ollie Watkins and Mitrovic. And 3 of them have come since the restart, so there's no signs of him slowing down. It'll be interesting to see what attacking players they play behind him, whether it be Joe Lolly, Sammy Amiobi, or Thiago Silva, or all 3. And it'll be interesting to see how our defence and midfield will cope with them.
Joe Lolly, I'm a big fan of. I mean, since Jared Bowen's left, I haven't got anyone to sort of like talk about all the time. My favourite right winger of the Championship, but Joe Lolly has always been very good, and he scored one of the goals today, didn't he?
He did indeed, and I think he has scored 2 or 3 since the restart and has 9 goals overall this season.
He's a left footer playing out on the right wing, likes to cut outside and then shoot across the goal. You know, Gareth Bale, Iron Robin, that sort of player. He's basically that, but just a lot worse. Very good Championship player.
He has a lot of assists, doesn't he? He does like to cross the ball too, is that right?
He's on 7 assists so far. He's basically a good Anthony knock-up. Not to knock him, but
well, that's just. I mean, honestly, I've been crying out for us to buy Joe Lolly, hopefully for next season, if we stay down. But we might be in the Premier League. Who knows?
I think the only other thing to point out: Nottingham Forest have a lot of connections to Jorge Mendes, who's a super agent. He represents Ronaldo and various other players.
So that's like Wolves as well, then.
A bit like Wolves, yeah. I think Mendes has got ties to Wolves as well. So I think Forest they're a bit like a mini Wolves at the moment, and it shows because they have a very large Portuguese contingent. They've got players like Thiago Silva, Tobias Figueiredo, João Carvalho, Alfa Semedo, large amount of Portuguese players. If they don't go out this year, they'll be a big threat next year and for seasons to come if they stay with Lamucci and they stay with the current system they have.
I'll just quickly ask you about the lineup that we should impose. So we are agreed that we think maybe we like the idea of Reed, Arter and Onomah as a sort of number 10. Knockout, I mean, what would you do with the front 3? Would you keep it as it was, Statto?
We have no choice but to. I think the only thing we can consider to look at is potentially Cabano coming in. And he's always been just a good squad player to have in the Championship. But Cavallero has looked quite off the pace since coming back, and he started on the bench since the restart. So I think maybe he might have a little knock or something. He might not be fully fit. So I think Cabano could be worth a start. It would have to be Bobby Reed up top unless Kamara comes back. Midfield-wise, I think Onomah has to start. And I think we're also getting to the point in this restart. We were aware that there's a lot of playing every 2 to 3 days, and we're kind of getting to that point now. I think we played 3 games in a week now, and I'd love to see Harrison Reed start every game. I'm not sure if he would be fit enough to. I'd like to think he would be, but if he's not, now might be a time to think of a bit of rotation if needed. If players aren't fully fit, maybe bring in Stefan Johansson, maybe bring in McDonald. I think particularly as Baldo mentioned, with Sambaso and Watson, having a player like Steph Joe in there who has a bit more pace and a bit more to him, that could really help us against them.
So time to use our central midfield depth on the bench, basically, is what you're saying, yeah. For the defence, Baldo, would you change anything, or would you have Joe Bryan start this game, or keep it to Cyrus and Odoi as the fullbacks?
I was going to say don't change your winning formula, but which way do you start? Because it really kicked off when Joe Bryan was playing at left back in the second half. So yeah, logic would dictate you start with Joe Bryan, I think. So right. I stay go with him. So it's Christie, Hector, Ream, and Bryan for me.
I personally wouldn't go for Christie and Bryan together. We did for this game, due to the fact that Birmingham was sitting back and defending. Forest will be a different ball game. They're a team that are close to us. They're going to want to win the game. I think it could be dangerous if we play both of them. I would like to see Odoi come back in. I think that's one of the reasons why he got taken off. He was already on a yellow card. I don't think Parker wanted to risk not having him for the Forest game, so I think we'll see him play. I would probably like to see Christie play over Bryan for that. So I'd like to see Odoi come into left back. With the centre backs, I think we can keep them the same, providing Ream's kind of up for it. I know he's kind of getting on a bit now. And if not, maybe time to look at bringing in Le Marchand or maybe one of the other missing men in Alfie Mawson.
Let's have your score prediction, please, Statto.
We have actually won 2 on the bounce now, which is some momentum, I want to say. I'd like us to get at least one more win against the top 6 side before the end of the season, aside from that one win against Leeds. I don't think it'll be pretty like we've seen earlier in the seasons. I think it's going to be more of the same of what we've seen lately. So I'm just going to say 1-0 Fulham.
I think it's going to be a pretty low-scoring affair. Nottingham Forest have got one of the best defences in the league, and let's face it, we haven't exactly been running away with things since the restart. So I can't see us getting many goals, and I can't imagine Nottingham Forest getting many goals either. Because as much as because they don't really score in batches in the same way we have done at various points in the season. So it's going to be a low-scoring one. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw personally.
That's something I was probably going to say, but I've got a feeling, particularly after listening to Statto's stats there, that we might just manage to get a smash and grab in the last minute. So I'm going to go 2-1 for them. 2-1 for them. All right, guys. Well, I will see you then. Thank you all for listening at home. We will be back with an instant reaction to the Nottingham Forest game where Frenchie will be hosting. And thank you very much to my co-host once again for being here for this instant reaction. If you like what you hear, please tell your friends about us. We're on Facebook, we're on Spotify, we're on all the social media outlets. And please keep tuning in. Bye for now.
Fulham.